The funeral happened on his wedding day. He didn't die when his heart stopped beating. He died the day he said, "I do." Not because love killed him, but because he traded his soul for it. He used to dream like a warrior, move like a storm, speak like a man with fire in his lungs. Now he whispers. Now he folds. Now he disappears in his own house. This is the silent death of modern men. A slow, polite suicide, buried under responsibility, decorated with wedding photos. You weren't born to be useful. You were born to be whole. But society told you that obedience makes you good, that sacrifice makes you strong, that being chosen by a woman means you're finally enough. It was all a lie. And Diogenes, the mad philosopher who lived in a barrel, saw it before anyone else. While other men begged to be loved, he laughed. Not because he hated love, but because he refused to die for it. He knew, to need nothing is divine. Socrates. But you needed to be needed, and that's why they broke you. The shocking truth. Most men are just well-dressed slaves. Man is not what he thinks he is what he hides. Andre Malraux. Let's rip the mask off. Most men aren't living, they're performing, not because they're weak, but because from birth they were taught one thing above all else. To be loved, you must be useful. So they perform. They work hard, provide endlessly, suppress their anger, swallow their pain, and smile. Because that's what a good man does, right? But here's the shocking truth. Most men don't become better through love. They become invisible. They were told marriage would sharpen them, that fatherhood would refine them, that a woman would make them whole. But no one told them the cost. No one told them that their wild nature, the fire that made them dangerous, alive, and masculine, would be the first thing sacrificed. Slowly, they stopped laughing loudly. They stopped dreaming recklessly. They stopped walking like kings, because kings don't beg to be chosen. The reward for conformity is that everyone likes you except yourself. Rita Mae Brown. And that's exactly what's happening to men. They are liked but not seen, appreciated but not respected, needed but not admired. Their entire identity becomes a function. Pay the bills, say the right things, be predictable, be pleasant, be safe. But what happens to a man when he is only valued for how well he obeys? He becomes a ghost in his own life. And no one saw this clearer than Diogenes, the wild philosopher who slept in a barrel, spat on power, and mocked the madness of society with nothing but truth. He watched as men paraded their wives like prizes, while secretly crushed by the emotional leash tied around their necks. He laughed at their desperation, not out of cruelty, but because they didn't even see the cage they built for themselves. They thought love was freedom. They were wrong. A man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone. Henry David Thoreau. And Diogenes? He let it all alone. He gave up status, possessions, reputation. But he kept his fire. And what have you given up? Your edge, your solitude, your ambition? All for what? To be approved by a woman whose love depends on how well you comply? That's not love. That's performance. And performance is exhausting. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt free to speak without filtering? When was the last time you made a decision without explaining it? When was the last time you said no and didn't feel guilty? You're not her man. You're her project. She wants to mold you, tame you, polish you. And the tragedy is, you think that's love. But Diogenes would piss on that illusion, literally. If only it were as easy to banish hunger by rubbing the belly as it is to masturbate for pleasure. Diogenes. Because he knew, most modern men settle not because they're wise, but because they're terrified of being unloved. That fear, it tames lions into lapdogs. You trade your roar for approval. You trade your instincts for acceptance. You trade your freedom for furniture. And you think you've won. You didn't win. You agreed to disappear slowly. In every real man, a child is hidden that wants to play. Friedrich Nietzsche. But now, You don't play, you manage, you monitor, you maintain. You walk through life like a body with a calendar, and one day you'll look in the mirror and not recognize the man staring back. That's the cost. Not just of marriage, but of unauthentic living. Diogenes didn't just reject the system, he mocked it. He saw that most men become predictable shadows of themselves the moment they seek safety over sovereignty. So he chose a barrel over a bed, a laugh over a lie, a bark over a vow, because deep down he knew you cannot serve two masters, your truth and her comfort. One will always die. And in most homes today, it's the man who dies first, not physically, but mentally, spiritually, existentially. A well-dressed slave with a job, a mortgage, and a fake smile. Diogenes had none of it, but he had everything that matters: clarity, peace, fire. The shocking truth. She desired him until he desired her more than his mission. When a man abandons his purpose for love, he becomes unlovable. A brutal truth inspired by Nietzsche. At first, she was mesmerized, not by his smile, not by his charm, but by the way he walked like he knew where he was going. With or without her, he didn't chase her. He didn't impress her. He simply was. A force, a fire, a man walking towards something ancient, something sacred. And that mystery, that distance, that silence, it haunted her in the most intoxicating way, because nothing awakens a woman's curiosity more than a man who doesn't need her to feel complete. But here's the tragedy. The moment she opens her heart, he forgets how to protect his. He begins to explain himself, apologize for his edges, and reorganize his mission around her comfort. The man who once walked like a god among mortals now walks like a boy afraid to lose his mother. He texts too quickly. He calls too often. He drops his boundaries to be a good man, and slowly, invisibly, she loses respect for the very man she once burned to understand. You think you lost her because you weren't loving enough? You lost her because you abandoned the flame that made you powerful. And this is where most men collapse. They believe that love means merging. But what a woman actually wants is a man who can stand alone, even with her by his side. She doesn't want to become your everything. She wants to orbit your something, your purpose, your structure, your code. Because deep down, a woman does not fall for the man who places her on the throne. She falls for the man who is already serving a kingdom greater than her. Here's the dark secret most modern men are never told. The moment you start living for her is the moment she stops living for you. Desire dies in security. Attraction dies in predictability. And love, real, timeless, feminine love, thrives on a man's unshakable commitment to his higher path. So no, she didn't leave because you didn't love her. She left because you stopped being someone she could respect. A man who keeps his mission sacred becomes the only man she can never forget, inspired by Marcus Aurelius in modern psychology. Become the solitary oak or be uprooted by her storm. Some men do not resist. They don't scream. They don't slam doors. They don't walk out mid-argument. They simply begin to quietly remove parts of themselves from their soul. They abandon what they believe, compromise what they despise, stay silent when their spirit begs them to speak. All to keep the peace, all to make her happy, all just to avoid being left alone in the house they built. And then one day he stands in the kitchen, looks at the woman in front of him, and no longer recognizes himself. Man is not shaped by love alone, but by the boundaries he refuses to erase, inspired by Carl Jung and Seneca. Men think love means sacrifice, but there's a quieter sacrifice that's killing them piece by piece. The sacrifice of selfhood. He's no longer the man who once had ideals, who once had a vision, who once radiated the power of purpose. Now he's a shadow who pleases, an empty update of his former self. But in the natural world, there is one kind of tree that survives for centuries through every storm, the solitary oak. Not because it bends better, but because its roots run deeper. It doesn't contort itself to appease the wind. It doesn't fall to avoid being disliked. It stands alone, but unshaken. Beaten by rain, torn by wind, but never betraying its own form. That is the image men must reclaim today. Not the perfect husband, not the sensitive modern man, not a progressive partner, but a pillar, not just for the family, but for the very meaning of life itself. When you become the kind of man she can't manipulate, you're not cruel, you're trustworthy. When you hold your principles through her tears, you're not cold, you're guarding both souls. When you stop asking permission to be yourself, you're not selfish. You are returning to the man she once admired. Conclusion: marriage doesn't kill men. Love doesn't weaken you. But abandoning your essence to be loved, that will cost you everything. Be the solitary oak. Let her storm rage. Let her winds test you. And when it's over, she'll look back and see only one man still standing. Not the loudest, not the most emotional, but the most deeply rooted.